Okay, so thank you everyone for joining in to our video on how to use the pesticide mapping tool. This was developed by Tracking California, which is a broader project to try to make data on environment and health available to regular citizens in California. So this is a great resource and a great teaching tool. And just to give a little background here, you'll see California on the map here, and you'll see lots of little grids and squares and dark red. And what that represents is the kind of division of the lands into something called the Public Land Survey System, which we'll talk a little bit more in a moment. And the red areas tend to be areas where there's higher pesticide use. And you can see that the Central Valley, the Salinas Valley, big ag areas down by San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara, and also the Imperial Valley tend to light up as high-use pesticide areas. You also see a little blotch of red up north near Mount Shasta, and they do a lot of nursery stock growing up there, actually. And then you'll see a lot of red in some of the grape areas north of San Francisco and Sonoma and Napa counties. So again, this doesn't say anything about the toxicity of the pesticides. It's just areas where there's more use. So now we're going to drill down to a little bit more detail on the pesticide use reporting system, which uses the Public Land Survey System. So here we have it in a little bit more detail. And this is the interface of what the website looks like, where you can manipulate location and the pesticides you focus on, and also the time of year, and then use that to get an idea, for example, of what pesticides are used in your county, what pesticides are used near your town, or even drill down a little bit further and look at pesticides used near your school or house. So Ken, in a few minutes, will be presenting this in more detail. Just a little bit of background on the Public Land Survey System and how the pesticide use information in California is related to that. The PLSS actually dates back to the late 1700s, when it's kind of a planning process. Local governments and the federal government, mainly, of course, on the East Coast, because the expansion out west was not yet complete, started to divide the land up into grids. And the units were a township and a section. And the township is a generally a 36 square mile area made up of 6 1 square mile squares, and you can see that in the figures here. And then those 1 mile square units were called sections, and then within the sections they were further divided up into smaller units, and then usually defined by the number of acres. And typically a square mile has about 640 square acres, and often those units would then be broken down further into 40 acre or 160 acre units. And if you remember, I believe when there was the settlement going on in the Midwest and Western Plains and other locations too, often the unit of land that was allowed for settlers was 160 acres. So that's where this system comes from. In California, we have something called the Pesticide Use Reporting System. And all agricultural pesticide use has to be reported to the state, and it has to be, you have to report the specific section that you use them in. So that means if there's a 1 square mile area, that's next to your house, you can look at the pesticides that were used in that square mile before in the previous year. So it has turned out that this information about pesticide use, which is geolocated or geocoded, turns out to be a really valuable way to, for example, characterize exposure or likely exposure, or just better understanding of pesticide use and what types of pesticides are being used. For example, some of the categories that we can look at are fumigants or carcinogens or cholinesterase inhibitors. And if you have questions about those, we can answer those separately. But the point is, it's a great tool to understand trends in pesticide use, and has also been a tool to inform policies and trying to target high-use pesticides and reduce the use of the ones that are the most toxic. So again, it's this pesticide use reporting system that's run by the California Department of Pesticide Regulation that operates the PUR system. So now we're going to shift to Ken, who's going to show us how you can actually use the pesticide mapping tool and hopefully turn that into a exciting and fun exercise for your students.
Okay, hello everyone. So this is the what you should see when you load into the pesticide mapping tool. It should show a map of California, which is where all the information was collected. You can see a little legend at the bottom left talking about the amount of pounds used, and so you can see the different colors, obviously different, showing different things. You're going to be seeing, it shows you townships. This bottom green bar will tell you the categories you're looking at, and I'm going to be showing you what those categories are. You can increase the opacity level just to make it stick out more, or you can just reduce it, but let's keep it at around 50. And over here, if you want to look up a specific like area, let's say King City, you can type it in here and it'll find it. Another helpful tool if your students are not or are like English learners or perhaps not native speakers, you can also do have become Spanish, which translates to, so that's also helpful for them to use just in case. But let's go back to English for this one. And you, in order to move around and zoom in on this map, you're not gonna be able to do it like a normal map where you scroll in with the mouse wheel. You're gonna have to click on the plus or minus to zoom in. And so let's click on the options you could possibly look at. So when you look at this, you can see the selection options. You're gonna be able to select the year. So you can select any year award from the year 2018 to 1991, which is the earliest date they have, and these are the range that they show. So if you want to click, let's say you want to see the showed in 2015, click OK, and it will switch the pesticides used in 2015. If you want to click the geographic units, you can do the county, township, or sections. These are the ones, the geographic areas that Asa described earlier. So you can select which level of organization you want to look at. Let's say you want to click on township, or let's say you click on section. Oh, you see that sometimes they're not available at the zoom level. So you're gonna go back to township, click OK. You're gonna zoom in more to, let's say, this area right here. Let's say somewhere near us. So let's say we're gonna click over here and we're gonna click let's say click on section. And so you see how it's a much smaller unit of measurement as mentioned before. So just depends on what you want your students to look at. So when we go to the one on the right, you can click on unit of measure. It will tell you how it's measuring the amount of pesticides. It has some pounds, so the pounds that are used, the acres treated, which is basically looking at the amount of land, or you have a pounds per acre, which, it's a rate of pounds per acre. You can also select to see different pesticides. So you can say, hey, if I want to look at the amount of carcinogens used, I click on carcinogens, I clicked OK. And it will only show me the amount of carcinogens used in 2015 in sections, looking at the amount of some pounds. And so we can see the amount used there. So that's what you can look at, or you can, let's say you want to look at specific type of pesticide. And it'll show you like a list of pesticides. You can just click on any of them, or you can type it in to look for if they have a certain type of pesticide you want to see. Let's leave it at that. And so you can select the crop or site. So you can also select what crops you want to see, like do they grow nuts, they grow almonds, carrots, strawberries, all that. So let's say I click on berries and let's see what happens. Okay, you can see the amount of places that grew berries in 2015, looking at the section and also and month that use carcinogens. So you can see that these are the sections that fit all those criteria. So this is just the way that you would use the mapping tool to figure it out. And if you just want to start back to the basics, you hit reset option and you hit OK. And it'll just go back to like this. So this is how you use the pesticide mapping tool. Now we're going to go more in depth into the actual activity that we provided for you. Okay, so let's say I want to look at just a random one. Let's say I click this area right here, or let's say I click this area in Hollister. So there are some options you're going to see. You're going to see some pounds, street acres, rates, which are the different units. There are two options here, the time series table and charts. and then the top 10 pesticides. If you click one, you will be switched to the other one at any time with this button. So don't worry about which one you select. So you can see right here, you can go to the state level, the county level, township level, and section level. And you can also change the way that like it's organized. And so you can see the amount of you see the pounds of what pesticides that were used. If you want to use a specific type of pesticide, you're gonna have to go to here and change it directly in order to see the amount there. But if not, you can go back to here and just look at the amount of pesticides used. And then you can go to click on this one to switch to the top 10 pesticides, and it will tell you the amount used in that area, in the amount used in the county, the amount used in the section. And then you can switch to the different year. Let's say I want to click to the year 2000 for this area in Hollister. And you can see, oh, these are all the different pesticides used in this section. Or let's say I want to click the township. I can do that too. And then let's say I want to look at the type of category of pesticides. Let's say I want to use a toxic air contaminants. And I can see that, oh, hey, these are the amount of toxic air contaminants used in 2000 in this township. And then you can also do like, you can organize it by like some pounds, or the rate, stuff like that. So these units right here, they will organize it to like usually like from the greatest to the least. So the amount of acres used in, amount used per acre, and the amount sum total used overall. So this is how you could like navigate the specific like time series and tools, which is what the mapping tool is supposed to show you.
That's great. And just to provide a little more information too on those categories, some things might be kind of obvious, like carcinogens, cholinesterase inhibitors, or things that inhibit cholinesterase, which is part of our nerve function. Endocrine disruptors tend to disrupt hormones. Things that are toxic air contaminants, that means they tend to be more volatile and get into the air easier. So fumigants obviously are a gas, and so they go into the air, very easily. But there's also some other pesticides that they still, even though you're applying them in a liquid or solid form, they can still evaporate pretty easily. So they get into the air. They might be called semi-volatiles, whereas a fumigant is considered volatile. But the semi-volatiles also get into the air, and they would often be classified as a toxic air contaminant, which means when they apply it, they may have to take special steps or apply it in certain ways to try to reduce how much goes into the air, or depending on the wind direction and wind speed, there also may be other restrictions as well.
What you can do for this activity is looking at townships in particular. So you can click here, you'll see the year, the geographic unit, the measure and all that. So what you're going to be looking here is you can click in here, and you can click township, you press OK, and it will divide it down further. And in order to scroll in or zoom in, you can't use like your mouse or anything like that. You have to click this button right here. So I will just let's just find the place I'm currently teaching at, which is over in Castroville. So let's see, I'm going over here, and I found out the area I'm teaching at. So I am currently teaching in this township right here. So I see this right here, and so I can click on either time series tables or charts. So I'm going to click on time series tables, okay? And when I go here, this is kind of what we provided to you in the presentation, what they could do. So the first things we want to look at is how many pounds of cholinesterase inhibiting pesticides were used in 2018 and in 2000 in the township that contains your school. So if I was to go back to the school I'm looking at, I can see here. So let's see. You see top 10 pesticides. I guess you're gonna have to go back out. Then you're gonna look for select category pesticides. You're gonna click the one that we want to use. Let's cholinesterase inhibitors. You can click OK. It might zoom you back out, so you just gotta go back in. You're gonna refine the township you're looking at, and then you're gonna click this one right here. Look at that, and it will show you the amount over this period of time. It will generally be from around 91 to the year 2018. They haven't done anything else newer as far as we know, so this is about as recent as you can get. So to go back, if we're looking at the amount used in 2000, they used 855 pounds of cholinesterase inhibitors in my township in the year 2000, and that has actually seemed to increase to 1,085 pounds used today or used in 2018. So that is actually a shift in going upwards, which perhaps may not be the best thing. So that's just things you can use to look at it. And so we go back to this one. We're gonna ask the question: did the top colinterase inhibiting change from what to what? So let's go back to here. You can see, let's say, click in the year 2000. You can see kind of like these compounds. You can see the years used. So you want to click on this one. You see the top 10. And you can see colinterase inhibitors, and then you can check like, oh, check 2018. What's the most one that's used? It's pronounced, I believe, Naled was the one that's most in 2018. And so we can go back all the way to the year 2000, which is what we're being asked to look, and we can see that it used to be completely different. In 2000, for my township, they used methodathion, and the one most used today, Naled, was fifth in the amount used. So you can see that it's really changed in the amount what they use and how much they use, which is something that students could probably take a look at, like what are these pesticides, look deeper into.
Can
And
I,
then we go back to another question. Oh,
can I comment there? Just looking at those top pesticides used, the methodathion, that pesticide is actually one of the more toxic organophosphate pesticides that are used. But naled, which seems to be a little bit more heavily used now, is more volatile. So naled is more likely to get into the air and for us to breathe it in, whereas methodathion is more toxic, and the exposures from that are potentially more serious.
yeah, that's also great to know, which is this could be interesting activity for students, like I mentioned, like if they see there are different pesticides being used, they could look to try to like get a basic understanding of what these are, what dangers they might present. So that could be interesting for students to look at. And so another question is, what is the time trend in use of cholinesterase inhibiting pesticides from 2000 to 2018 to the township you examined? So we would go back to the time series, and we can see that from 2000, it's remained, I would say, somewhat stable. It's always remained at around the 0 to 2000 mark, which doesn't seem like so, but it's fairly stable until today, where it's fairly close to what happened as it used to be. So that's kind of what you can do with cholinesterase. So let's say we'll go to the next one, where we're looking at fumigants. And so instead of, when I go back to here, oh, actually, did I actually look at King City? So let's go try and find King City. Let's see. So I'm gonna go back out. You can type in probably up here. Let's say type in King City.
That was King City, Ontario, Canada. I have to make sure it's
Yep,
California.
I didn't realize that. Let's see, California. Here it is. So I'm just gonna click. I'm gonna click one of these ones that are just in the city. So I'll click on this one. Click on time series of tables, and I'm gonna go to the here, to the top 10 pesticides, and I'm gonna switch over to fumigants. So it actually says no records found, which could always be an issue. Like maybe the area that you're looking at just didn't really record it, or they used nothing. So if I'm looking at fumigants, the amount used, let's see. Oops, it's not changing for some reason. I guess we'll just have to go through here. Select fumigants, click OK. Then we're just gonna go in.
I
We're gonna
think
see that.
this is an
Mhm.
interesting little message here, because the
Yep.
fumigants tend to be used most heavily around with strawberries, because they fumigate the fields every year. And maybe what we're seeing here is that most of the fumigants used in Monterey County are in the north, up and near the Pajaro Valley up in southern Santa Cruz County, where we have more strawberry production and therefore a lot more fumigant use. I bet that's the reason why we're not seeing fumigants so commonly in King City. So
Yeah.
maybe compare King City to, for example, Chular or Pajaro Valley.
Yeah, that could be really interesting to see it. So let's see. So yeah, they're gonna note like, hey, that could be a reason for why that there's no fumigants used there, which could be something interesting for your students to look into, like why certain pesticides are used and what's the reason for why certain areas have higher than others. So let's go back to this one. It's asking for how many were used in 2018. Well, we see that pretty much nothing was used in King City. So except for this little section right here, let's click it. So 2018, actually, it goes to 65 pounds fumigants, which is basically nothing, which is honestly pretty good to see that they've gone down. There was a huge spike in 2015, and all of a sudden just completely fell off, which is really interesting here. It's something that they could possibly look into.
Yeah, and that spike may be because sometimes they'll fumigate land before they'll plant, say, grapes. And once the grapes are planted, they don't fumigate every year, but they kind of use it to prepare the soil. And that's in contrast to the strawberries where they usually fumigate every year.
Oh, that is interesting to see. So let's see. Let me go. So let's say go back to tasking handle. It's asking for how many contains your school. So I'm going to go back to my area. Let's see, where is it? Should be over here. And Casterville. Oh, and it's incidentally, the area containing my township does not have any fumigants used or recorded. So that is good to know. Perhaps they didn't use it. But let's go to the one right next to it just to see what it could be like. So we're going to go to the one right next to it. We can see that when it comes to like this, we have to make sure we click township, by the way. So it's asking how many pounds of fumigants we used in 2000 in pounds that contain into a school. So we look back to year 2000. It's quite a lot. 400. Let's see, what is that? 430,627 pounds of fumigants we used in the year 2000, which is quite a lot. And let's compare it to today. Let's for the comparison to King City. 314,093 pounds, which is still a very high amount, albeit about 100,000 pounds less, which is a good thing to see. But like, that is interesting to note that this is what's happening to the trend compared to like King City, where this is a heavier agriculture area. That could explain why. And let me go back to the question here, asking what was the top fumigant used in 2000 and 2018. So once again, I can click here, top 10 pesticides. So I look at 2000. I have chloropycrin, which is the one that's mostly used as far as 2018. Then let's say I go to 2000 to compare it, and we see that it is methylbromide. This was the top one back at the time, but chloropycrin was still there. So that's interesting to see.
Can I make a comment there that methyl bromide used to be very heavily used with strawberries, and that's what we're seeing here. But in the mid 2000s or so, it was banned. And so methyl bromide is no longer used for strawberry production. And to compensate that, they increased use of chlorpicrin, and they also increased use of something called 1,3-dichloropropene. And 1,3-dichloropropene is actually very controversial right now. The Department of Pesticide Regulation is developing a risk assessment for bystanders and people near applications. And some people feel like DPR is not being as protective as they should be, but it's a complex issue establishing regulations. And you can see how with these pesticide use information, you can see how things have changed. And 1,3-dichloropropene is also considered a carcinogen.
Is it important to know? Also, just to make sure, I also forgot to click the township, but that's also important. And you can see they use some other ones which are in the maybe it was more in the specific township, not the section that I chose. So yeah, but yeah, that's good to hear about these extra information, and also more things for students could possibly look up and to see what happened, what caused the shift in the changes of what they used. Okay, so let's see. Now we're gonna go back to the mapping activity. And now we're going to be looking at neonicotinoid pesticides. So let's go back here. Let's go click over here to township. We're going to click on neonicotinoids. Neonicotinoids. Then we're going to click on this one. And we're going to see that it is pretty much this. Oh, went all the way up. Yeah, so this would be the township that I have. So I'm going to click on here. And let's go back to the question. It's asking for how many pounds of neonicotinoid pesticides were used in 2018 and how many were used in 2000. Okay, so let's go look and see. So we can see that pretty much before the year 2000, they were never used. And then in 2000, they used 3 pounds of it. And it had a dramatic spike in 2015 but then it rose down now to be only 42 pounds of neonics used in the township that contains my school, which is apparently much less compared to like the fumigants that we saw, which used hundreds of thousands of pounds, which could be interesting for you students to see, like, why did they use so much of that pesticide, but so little of this one. And then another question that I asked for, what is the trend of use, or actually no, that's asking did the top neonicotinoid change? So let's go back to the top 10 pesticides and look see that. So I'm gonna go back to township, make sure to change that. And so go click neonicotinoids. And we're gonna see that, let's see, these are the top 5 that were used today. I'm not gonna try to pronounce the names because I do not know them, but these are the top 5 from today or from 2018. We can go back to the year 2000, and we're gonna see it's only one of them was used. It was this one starting with, I believe, an I. That was the only one used in this township, and so it's the only one there now. But we see that they've created more of them, and it's still the highest rate. It's still the ones that's most used today, which is kind of interesting to see because, like, while the other ones, all of them had a shift in the most used one, but neonics remained the same.
Right. And just a little background on those. So it's imidacloprid and acetamiprid, clothianidin, and I can't quite see the other ones. So I'm not sure on the pronunciation. But you can see that over time, the use of neonicotinoids has increased. And that's because increasingly they're being used as a replacement for organophosphates. Both pyrethroids and neonicotinoids are tending to replace organophosphates because they're less acutely toxic to humans, acutely being they don't make you sick fast. Concerns about neonics, though, is that they tend to be more persistent in the environment, and they're often used as what we call systemic pesticides. So when you put it on a plant or it goes on the soil, it gets absorbed into the plant, and you can't wash it off. It's not like it's on the surface of the leaves or the surface of the plant. And there's a lot of concern that neonics are responsible for declining insect populations in natural environments away from ag areas, that they may be partly responsible for the decline in honeybees, and that they might be contributing to this, what people are calling the insect apocalypse, and maybe reducing bird populations and other wildlife that depend on insects for food.
Yeah. So you can see how like just one type of thing can connect to so many other issues. So it's something for students can also look into, like what are the pros and cons of certain type of pesticide? What are the effects it could have? How could it affect other related issues? Which is all stuff for your students to look at. So let's see, what is the time trend of neonicotinoid use? Well, we can see that it's pretty much all gone up from 2018 to 2000 to 2018, which is interesting. But it also they had a slight drop from 2015 until 2018. So it could be something that that happened there. And when it came to the amount used, well, we see that it is just basically increased the amount and it also increased the types of neonics used, which is all stuff that is important to note.